Alright, so this is going to be the first of 8 instructional videos regarding an introduction to the Scottish side drum. This is going to be the first one, primarily focused on holding the sticks. Alright, so first simplest start here is just going to be holding the right stick. Fairly intuitive generally if you're already familiar with drumming, but I'm not going to make that assumption and just start off with a little bit of basic mechanics on this. In a lot of cases, the unique Scottish grip is not all that unique, and more importantly, it's not the only way of doing it right, but it's the way I've found spends the least time trying to fight against the laws of physics and just kind of lets you focus more on playing. So, with the right stick, we basically adopt a basic lever, as you can see right here with the right hand, basically pinching but not necessarily keeping pressure on the stick between the thumb, about here, and the index finger just below that bottom joint there. We use that as the fulcrum for the lever that lets the stick traverse up and down, like that. Then we use these back either 2 or 3 fingers, it's not really important whether or not the pinky is involved, and simply pull up on the back of the stick, and that's how we get an actual motion to get the stick down, taps, doubles, buzzes, or even for dead strokes. Finally, the last little adjustment is you can actually make some rotation adjustments with the stick, which determine how far out or how far in the grip of the stick goes. The farther in, I've found that it's really easy to control open stuff, but getting precise control over buzzes is more difficult. Farther out, the opposite tends to be true, but there is one range where, in the cup of the palm, right there, trapping the stick right in that gap, gives us the best opportunity to not only trap the stick with a little bit of tension to create dead strokes and buzzes, but that also really consistently opens up the stick for a consistent point where we can do repeated buzzes, repeated double strokes, repeated triples, and more importantly, it's a nice consistent reference that lets us line up the elbow through the wrist joint, down through that grip between the thumb and the index finger, all the way looking out towards the front of the stick. And that's what we're going for with the right hand. Seems fairly simple, but don't be afraid to use this and other references to just make sure that you're getting that right. If you get this right, you don't really have to do it a whole lot more. If it's off, you'll end up kind of chasing your tail a little bit once you're onto slightly more advanced music, because again, you'll find yourself kind of fighting against the laws of physics slightly. So, onto the slightly more advanced side, and this is the left hand. It's going to be a little bit mirrored in the video. Hopefully you can work along with that, since I can do it this way best. So with the left hand, this is unique to playing traditional grip, since historically the drums would be slung on this corner, which would leave them hanging at about this angle, and it was pretty impractical to try and reach up with the elbow and reach over a nice tall wooden rim of a drum to play there. So instead, what was adapted was a modified grip that instead relies on the left thumb to produce pretty much all of the downward energy with the stick. So, a lot of the same concepts apply. We actually have the same lever point fulcrum on the stick, and right here we're basically using the webbing of the thumb right in this region, and just setting the stick on there. This next part's going to be the trickiest to continue doing, but I can provide more explanation on that shortly, is placing the thumb down the stick, reaching forward towards the bead, so that we have levers to push the stick down. The reason I said this takes a little bit more clarification is proper thumb placement down the stick doesn't really give you the opportunity to mechanically bring the stick back up. So oftentimes newer players will use their thumb trying to use the sort of double jointed trick to pull back on the stick, but instead that really is just inefficient, and they wind up holding the stick here with very, very little leverage on the stick, and they don't feel like there's a lot of control over which way the bead goes. So instead, just be very aggressive and push the thumb down to here. An exercise to really convince yourself that you can play like that is to just rest the thumb in that fulcrum grip, and then using your other hand, push just down on the top of the stick. And again, it actually does work. So this is going to take a lot of time, or at least it takes enough time to reach the breakthrough point where you get comfortable relying on the bounce of either the drum pad or the drum itself to bring the stick back up for you. But once you've reached that confidence that you can just push down on the stick and have the stick continually come back up when you need it and how you need it, and develop a little bit of feel with that, this can become extremely comfortable. So, the last part of the grip that we're going to focus on is what to do with these 4 fingers. Generally, the simplest thing to do is just to keep these 2 fingers lined up alongside the stick, not really touching, but they're there more of as a safety net so that if the stick tries to escape out in this direction over here, instead they'll just collide with these fingers and stay right in line there. Finally, the ring finger, or third finger, since my left hand has a ring on it, is actually used to pick the stick back up. This is a little bit unique. A slight bend in these fingers will allow this drumstick to come in contact right there, again, right around that last joint in the finger, and from that point you can actually pick the stick up just by moving your arm straight up and down with that. The last detail with this is to avoid, again, pinching the stick here. We want the thumb over the stick. If we wind up holding the stick consistently at an angle, it's either going to want to escape one direction or another, or we'll wind up basically crab clawing it here. We don't actually want to crab claw it, so whenever possible, try and keep that stick completely horizontal, except for little variations with the thumb, but generally horizontal and working right here in this area. So to work around that, we actually use a lot more forearm up and down instead of trying to use a lot of wrist, because using a ton of wrist basically means we have to absolutely have control over the stick by squeezing it, which not only takes a little bit more effort, takes away some of that refined feel we can get out of these little small bits, but also with that large amount of wrist, we end up with an actually different pitch of the stick. You may not be able to hear it on this, but I'll go ahead and try and demonstrate. So being really locked on the wrist, we kind of get a more deadened feel. Whereas being completely relaxed, you'll actually hear a little bit of a high-pitched whoop sound coming off of the stick. So, the last 2 things to adjust and be aware of when you're looking at sticks is, especially while you're started, don't be afraid to just come to a complete stop and reevaluate exactly how you're holding the stick. If it feels the stick is a little bit front heavy, you can sneak up a little bit on the grip. Likewise, if it feels a little bit back heavy, you can come back on the stick until it feels really right. That's okay, get used to that. Same with this side, same problem. And a lot of times what I say with that is, instead of trying to find a way to grit through it, it is a lot like learning how to ride a bike. You'll never learn how to ride on the rubber side down if you keep starting it off leaned off to the side and try to pedal right away. You'll just kind of crash a bunch and be confused. Just go ahead and get completely set, really, really relaxed, and then we can go forward and start working on specific exercises. And at the end of each exercise, don't be afraid to stop, visually take a look, and evaluate how the sticks feel going forward, because once you have the sticks just right, we can start working on other stuff. Thanks.